So before I left Michigan, I put it in his desk drawer at the office at his church. So when he goes to his desk, the talking bass is at his desk, because I didn't want it. But you know what I mean? When you give gifts out of obligation, there's no joy in it. You give it because you trust God. You give it because you have faith that God's going to take care of you. What's the difference between a tithe and an offering? Okay, here's the difference. Valentine's, you give a card. That's your tithe. That's the minimum. You know what I'm saying? Oh, come on. An offering is when you go above and beyond the minimum. It's when you do it out of love. When you do something that's charitable and that's kind and that takes sacrifice. I've come to believe I enjoy giving gifts. I enjoy giving them more than I enjoy receiving them. But one of the things now that really kind of takes some of the fun out of it is the internet. Because I don't even have to go anywhere now. Part of it was when you would ask for something that there's only one store in town and it's all the way across town, and people had to make an effort to go over there. You knew it was an act of love, that they did it because they were sacrificing. Now you go to www whatever and have it sent to your house. And they do it, and it's a lot easier. An offering is when you do something above and beyond the minimum of what's expected. So the offering is a gift, but it's motivated by love, and you give it above your tithe. So when you hear the phrase up front, we're going to receive our tithes and offerings, those are two different things. The tithe is 10%. The offering is something you do above that. Some people that's $20, some people it's $100, some people it's one time a year, $1,000. The tithe and offering. For example, if you support the church, we do 10%, but you support Youth for Christ, as an example. That's an offering. That's above your tithe. That's the way that's supposed to be. The Bible says that we should bring the tithes into the storehouse, meaning to the place of worship. That's what the Bible says. So the things we give to other ministries, Salvation Army and the Gospel Mission, that will be considered an offering. So the offering is given out of love above your tithe. There's some of you going, you know what? I've read the Bible and tithing is an Old Testament thing, and I think that's Old Testament. That's not for now. Okay, well let's talk about that. Is tithing an Old Testament principle? Obviously, if it started in Genesis, yes, it's an Old Testament principle. But here's the question. What does the Old Testament and the New Testament say about giving? Not about tithing, but about giving. Because the perspectives are completely different. Okay? Now here's how it works. This is the tablecloth at one of my favorite restaurants. It would be Pizza Hut. Okay? Pizza Hut's one of my favorite places. And I realize that, some of you skip breakfast on Sunday morning, and then it's almost time for lunch. But that right there is a really good looking pizza. Okay? So the question, what is the Old Testament perspective on giving? How much of this pizza really belongs to God? If that it represented our income, if that represented your resources, not just your financial income, your time, talent, a whole bit, how much of it belongs to God according to the Old Testament? Okay, this is what the Old Testament says. The earth is the Lord and everything in it. Okay, so what percentage would that be? It all belongs to God. The whole pizza belongs to God. Everything I have, everything I do, everything we see belongs to God. So what's the Old Testament perspective on how much we can use? Well, it's not quite the whole thing. This one says, to bring a tithe of everything from the land, whether it's grain from the soil, fruit from the tree, because the tithe is holy to the Lord. So we're to bring, according to the Old Testament, a tithe, a tenth, of everything that we have. Time, talent, treasure. And we're supposed to present it to the Lord because it's holy to the Lord. And it's holy to the Lord not because our money's holy. It's holy because God said, that's mine. Don't mess with it. So what's the Old Testament perspective? Continue on. This is from Chronicles. The Israelites generously gave the first fruits. They brought a great amount, a tithe of everything. Okay, so they gave generously. When I used to travel a lot as a speaker, you'd go places and they would say, well, we'll give you a love offering, also known as a free will offering. Okay, now what that means is, if I love it, I'll give some, but if not, it's free. That's what that means. Because I can tell you, after 13 years of traveling around, doesn't matter what size group it is, doesn't matter what kind of church it is, it's $1 a head. $1 a head. So you have people that go out depending upon the Lord to provide for them an income. that would come to a church like this today, drive all the way across the state, come here at 7:30, set up, do their thing, dress their kids nice, comb their hair, get them back in the van and get out of here, and they'd walk out of here with $150. That's the average. I did have one church that I went to, and I will never forget this. It was in South Dakota, and I was supposed to be there to speak in a school on Monday, and they put me in these two churches on Sunday morning. And I walked into this one church. It was huge, 450 people. I'm thinking, this is great. I'm going to get about $500. My family needs this. I did that, and then I had to hurry off to this little country church, and there were 24 people. And there wasn't a one of them there that had their own teeth or their own hair. You know what I'm saying? Okay? And I'm talking to this, and I'm a youth guy, and I'm talking to these senior saints, and they were saints, and I'm walking out there, this is crazy. What am I wasting my time for? Get in my car, they gave me my little check, I go to my car, and I open up the check from the big church, $149. Go to the little church, $450. And I went, okay, I get it. They gave an offering, they gave generously. And when we have guests who come here and participate, we need to bless them. We need to give what you were going to spend for lunch. We need to give what I was going to spend for lunch or what I was going to do that week. It's amazing how God will bless you when we're generous. So the Bible perspective, even the Old Testament perspective, is that we're supposed to be generous. So according to the Old Testament, those of you that think tithing is an Old Testament principle, how much of the pizza is ours? Well, about that much. That's how much God gets according to the Old Testament, 10%. According to the Old Testament. Some of you are like, yes, but the Old Testament was under the law. We live under grace. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you very much. The first 10% of what we get always belongs to God, and we're not to use it. That leaves us 90%. So when you're figuring your budget and you make $100,000 a year, $10,000 of that belongs to God. 27% of it belongs to us. So you're not really bringing home $7,000, $8,000 a month. So when you're planning your budget, and I'm only speaking out of experience, you don't have as much money. It's a weird principle, but that's the Old Testament principle. You say, well, okay, the Old Testament people were called to live by the law. That was what the whole Old Testament was about. I'm going to tell you what to do, and they didn't do it. You ever tried that with a child? Don't touch that. What do? Touch it. I tried it with my kids with a lawnmower. It don't work. I don't want to see you mowing the lawn. It doesn't work that way. But you know what I mean? If they tell you you can't have it, you want it. You can't eat chocolate, what do you crave for? Can't have ice cream. Okay? The whole point is the law didn't work because the people wouldn't obey. It's kind of like in America. They had freedoms. They had freedom of choice, and they chose not to do what God asked them to do. But they were called to live by the law. Remember the series we did on the Sermon on the Mount? The whole time Jesus was trying to teach the people. This is what the law says, but I got a new law for you. And it was the law of love. And the law of love is much more sacrificial than just living by the law. There are people today, even in America, that tithing for them is an excuse not to give. Hi, Brother Smith, Brother Jones, listen, we've got this crisis need. We've got a family in town. Their house just burned down, and we're just out collecting money. Oh, no, I've already given my tithe. I gave my 10%. I'm not obligated to give any more.